I'm Charles Seapost. It's Curtain Call on KRCB Santa Rosa, and with me in this segment, I have two guests. John DiGaetano, author. Welcome.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks.
And Bill Garner, who is, Bill, welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
And you are here to talk about John's Sherlock Holmes 10-minute play. So, first of all, Sherlock Holmes 10-minute plays.
Yeah.
I saw 3 volumes on Amazon.
Yeah, actually, there's the book here is the collection, which is 9 stories. And how this all started was, it's such a great character or characters, and I thought very few stories are staged, so it would be interesting. And nowadays, with the way things are moving so quickly, Vegas, the shows are an hour and a half, and they're getting shorter and shorter. I said, why not cut to the chase and do it in 10 minutes? So in other words, create the problem and the solution in 10 minutes, and run about a few stories like this together.
Well, I understand that this has legs already.
It's interesting because it was at first it started as just a concept. I said, gee, I'll put these stories down. They're kind of interesting. I'll add these characters and see what happens. Well, it turns out that I came up with 9 stories, and so we're going to be performing 5 of them in London in October. Originally, we performed one of the stories in New York at 43rd Street, the Roy Arias Theater, and it was pretty well accepted. So we made a few adjustments, added the other stories, and now we have a delightful evening of short stories.
Fantastic. Well, I know, Bill, that you're here to read part of one of these plays. Are you up to doing that now?
I'm up to doing that now, and basically, I'm not going to do it as Watson. Think of me as Charlie Rose Jr. Okay, I haven't had time to work on the accent, so I'm just going to give the background. It's actually from his play, but it's like Charlie Rose Jr. Welcome tonight, and my guest is, and I'll read this, and then you can go on with John.
Very good.
And so maybe I could just set you up on this, just
Please.
real quickly. This particular story is called Sherlock Holmes and the Failed Attempt, and it's an interview with a serial killer, or a potential serial killer, I should say, which is on the loose and has created the bedlam in the city with the residents, and they remain on edge because that killer is still on the loose. So Holmes and Watson are sent in to just assist and interview this particular person of interest.
Criminal cases are continually hinging upon if the evidence points to the right man. Today there are hundreds of men now walking the earth who long ago would have paid the penalty of their crimes if a conclusive test existed. Now, under police procedure, a man is suspected of a crime months, perhaps years after it has been committed. His place of residence and clothing is examined, the stains discovered and analyzed among them. Mud stains, rust, fruit, possibly sexual in nature, or what? Those are the questions that puzzle experts because in this time there are not reliable tests. Now we have Sherlock Holmes and his way of looking, testing, of discussing. There may be no longer any difficulty. However, will he meet his match, linger on what could have been? Only the attempt will tell here. It is a calm afternoon, and Holmes and Watson are summoned to Scotland Yard on the request of Inspector Lestrade. The series of murders without closure has the city residents on edge, to say the least. Holmes and Watson met the previous day and had arranged and inspected the residence of one individual that had been brought to their attention with increasing interest, but not as yet deemed a suspect. The two spent several hours at that apartment. It consisted of a couple of modest rooms, sparsely furnished, few possessions with detail to follow. At Scotland Yard, as the play begins, Holmes is already seated, waiting for Inspector Lestrade to enter. I join him now as I did that day.
Beautifully read. And this is Bill Garner doing our reading from John DiGaetano's Sherlock Holmes 10-minute plays. Very effective and interesting and I think timely. So what kind of staging do you do since these have transformed from short stories to plays?
Well, it's interesting because the actors are going to spend a lot of their time with the direction of the show. I can only tell them, hey, well, here's a suggestion for you. But there really isn't any staging except for there's in these 5 stories, we have one prop in the show. It's a box on a pillow, and there's 2 chairs and a table. That is it. So it's basically a black box. So there's really very bare staging.
And what's the response of the actors? I don't know if, Bill, you were one of the actors in any of these previous, in any of the previous stagings of this, or if you will be in the future, but what's the response of the actors in bringing these Sherlock Holmes 10-minute plays to life?
You know, originally I put out a message to everyone and said, hey, I have these stories, I'd like you to read them. And I, on LinkedIn, got a response from all over the world: Australia, Scotland, France, England, of course. And I was amazed of the interest that there was. This all originated with sending the script to someone over in Boston, and they said, gee, we like this. You need to talk to this person here in New York, and it kind of springboard from that. So I had no real intentions of sending it anywhere, but I just wanted people to get an idea of what it was like.
So what was your original intention or your original concept of what might happen with
Well,
these?
I've always thought of these stories and putting them on paper, and I thought maybe eventually we could perform them. Maybe maybe a school could perform them for an evening, or maybe a fundraiser or something like that. Just an evening of stories.
Any interest from schools?
Actually, there is a school in Boston that just sent me an email just a couple of days ago, and they said they'd like to perform it in November. So I thought that was fantastic.
So, do you have any plans for other works based on this concept?
I have some other stories that I have written that are not related to Sherlock Holmes, but they're out there. One is actually a radio show that they're putting together, and the stress that the actors go through when they're off the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this would lend itself beautifully to radio.
Yeah.
Because you've got 10-minute plays, and so they're in. I know that they're not all exactly 10 minutes, but they lend themselves in that they're short segments. You can pause between them, and put a place for station breaks. You can put several in an hour. How about video?
Yeah, possibly. This is still in the works. We went through our first draft right now, and now we'll go through a second draft in London. We're performing at the Leicester Square Theatre in the West End, and then also at the King's Head Theatre after that. And then I'm sure there's going to be a couple of revisions, and we'll see what happens after that.
And John DiGaetano, I want to thank you for being my guest on Curtain Call.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Break a leg when you go to London, October 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th.
Right.
And you can find out all about those London productions as well as the books on John DiGaetano's website, johndigaetanoproductions.com. I want to also thank my other guest, Bill Garner. Thanks for coming in and reading.
Thank you.
I'm Charles Sikos. It's Curtain Call on KRCB. Thanks to Winston Bull, our engineer, and Wendy Nicholson, our producer.